Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Meera from Madras Christian College from the Department of Public Administration. What is public administration? It is a discipline which can link between the policies, development administration, the management and so many various other subjects. Public administration is actually a nexus, it creates a nexus between the government and its citizens. Today, we are going to look into development administration, which is a part of public administration. What is development as such? Development indicates the progress of a nation. Where do we find development? How can you decide a country is developed or not? A country can be developed based on the per capita income, the gross domestic product, and so many various other factors. When a country starts developing, we find that the facilities provided to the citizens also increase. So development administration is one of the major aspects of the government. It actually reaches out to the people through this particular subject. Development administration, as it is rightly stated, takes place when an index of that which is deemed desirable and relatively preferable increases in magnitude. It's a relative concept. As it is rightly pointed out, it is a very desirable concept and increases in magnitude. What kind of a magnitude are we referring to here? It is a magnitude which states about the progress the country is facing as such. Development administration has two major goals. What are they? They are nation building and socio-economic progress. What is nation building? Nation building is actually an integration between various political institutions that are present, which defines the geographical boundaries. It is pertaining to one country as such. A nation develops based on its very country. It speaks about what are the progress it happens. Take for instance India. When we think about building India, we speak about nation building from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Gujarat to Assam. So we have a great development that is facilitated by the government through its various policies. So it is defined within the geographical boundaries based on the ideologies of the government as such, or you can say the political ideologies of the government. So as it is rightly stated here, nation building is a deliberate fashioning of an integrating political community within fixed geographical boundaries in which the nation state is a dominant political institution. So is development administration only pertaining to nation building? Absolutely not. We also have the socio-economic progress. A country has to think about the people's culture, the social, in terms of social context, the political context, the economic context of the country. So in that case, the government has to think about the welfare policies that has to reach to the people. It has to think about what are the measures it would take to provide various schemes, the policies, etc. So ultimately today, the government has to look into the needs and preferences, the choices of the people. Earlier was the state where we had a polar state. We were under the colonial rule and we were ruled by the Britishers. So completely it was an authoritarian rule, and so we call it as a polar state. Slowly after independence, we shifted to what is called as the welfare state. The government started to look upon or look onto the welfare of the people. So we developed with the mixed economy system, and the government took the responsibility of providing the welfare based on the needs of the people. So development administration is actually an integral part of the public administration, as it is to cater to the development and upliftment of marginalized and backward areas. So it is just not for the people. Like our constitution, the Indian constitution states, we have the right to equality. So right to equality means it has to reach to every citizen of the country, irrespective of caste, creed, gender, etc. So we need to focus on the development and upliftment of marginalized and backward areas. There is another concept of development which is being integrated with modernization and modernity. Modernization and modernity more or less are the same. But how can you integrate, or how can you say they are relatively similar to the development? Development is based on the modernization and the vice versa. Today we are into digital revolution. So we are upgrading ourselves into the system of modernization. So our country is also progressing through this kind of a development. Today there are various opportunities for the students to get into online learning systems. So again, here we find that we are upgrading to modernization. You can listen to ample lectures sitting in India. You can listen to ample lectures that are happening in the Western countries and vice versa. So you find modernization there, and henceforth the development happens. Development happens because of the technological advancement also. So development, modernization and modernity are related concepts for the transformation of the society that involves social, economic and political changes. So all these happens only when you bring in a change within the social, economic and political attributes. World Development Report of 1997, it has brought in the 5 fundamental tasks. We keep talking about development as nation building and socio-economic progress, but what actually is involved here? 1. Establishment of a good law. So we have a law system. What is this law? You have your articles, the fundamental rights, the duties and directive principles of state policy. The country has so many in its store. So it is dependent on this strong foundation of law that comes in our constitution. Why do we have this particular law? So that we follow secularism, socialism and provide the liberty to the people in the freedom of expression, speech, etc. So we need to have a good foundation of law. Second one, maintaining a non-distortionary policy environment. We need policies. How are the policies framed? When a policy is being framed, you call it as a policy process as such, where you start with policy making. Who are the official and unofficial actors present in the making of the policies. Government, the bureaucrats, in the government we can say we have the three branches of the government, the legislative, executive and the judiciary. They come under the official actors. Unofficial actors are the pressure groups, the citizens as such. So when all of them together make the policy, are involved in making the policy by giving the choices, the demands and preferences, then slowly you start making the policy and implementing. Implementing happens through the legislature. The legislature puts forth what are the policies that are required for the country. For example, we have the environmental policy, the new educational policy. Environmental policy speaks about how to control pollution, how to keep the country very clean. Educational policy, it speaks about how the education system has to run in the country, how the system has to work. It focuses on the students, the teachers and the assessment, pedagogy, so many systems. So the policies are for the educators as well as for the students. So we need to have a proper policy environment also to make it very effective in the country. 3. Investing in basic social services and infrastructural facilities. We require social services. What do I mean by social services here? Social services are the healthcare systems, the infrastructure that we get, the transportation, the building. So many aspects, that's the infrastructural. Social services where you give employment to the people, where you educate the vulnerable sections of the society. So we need to invest in the basic needs of those people also. So investing in basic social services and infrastructural facilities. Then the fourth one, protecting the vulnerable. You need measures to protect the vulnerable. Who are the weaker sections in the society? Today, weaker sections in the society are considered to be the women, where you need women and the children. So the children need to be protected by the Child Rights Act. There are laws for the children. You have, every state has got certain schemes. For example, Tamil Nadu has got Integrated Child Development Scheme. We have the midday meal scheme, which is prevalent all over the states in our country. So we need to protect the children because they are the future generation. Women also have various other schemes for them. The women in the maternal scenario, so they all have been given the provisions to take care of themselves. So protecting the vulnerable is also important for the government. Then protecting, the last is the protecting the environment. Only when the environment is neat, it's clean and non-polluted, will the people be healthy. Wherever you see the air pollution to be very high. The carbon monoxide is very high. So the air is actually polluted with a lot of chemicals, the pollutants, the contaminants that are present from the gases that are emitted out of the vehicles. So we need to control the pollution, and in this way we can keep the environment clean and pure. So establishing a foundation of law, maintaining a non-distortionary policy environment, investing in basic social services and infrastructural facilities, protecting the vulnerable and protecting the environment. Now these tasks, why do we require these tasks? They are required for sustainability. Sustainability means in the long run how we are going to protect our country, how are we going to protect the people in the country. So these tasks enable sustainability and provide development through poverty reduction. Unemployment can be thwarted. So many aspects can be carried out while accomplishing these tasks. So these actually should be the core vision of the government to sustain in the future. During the World War, the developing countries did not know how to come out of the imperial control. Once the Second World War II ended, the developing nations wanted to be strong. They wanted to have a strong foundation. Now today we call the countries, or we categorize the countries in three aspects: development, developed nations, developing nations, and the least developing nations. But today we can call these developing nations, example India, can be considered as a progressive developing country as such. So after the Second World War II, the developing countries did not know how to survive. And that is how we had this 1950 Marshall Plan. It was a recovery plan that was introduced after the Second World War. This plan was to just self-help and mutual help involving the whole populations. And the main aim of this plan was Comprehensive Country Program. Why this Comprehensive Country Program? It is to bring them out of poverty, the economic distress. They were facing a lot of economic distress. So this Comprehensive Country Program focused in the fields of economic and social development. Society was important. Without people, there is no government. So social development was one of the major aspects the government had to focus upon. And if there is no money, no income, the country would tarnish. The country would fade away from the system. So major contribution of this Comprehensive Country Program was in the field of economic and social development. So majorly this particular program focused on the low income group of countries, and how could they be revived was the next thing that they started thinking about. So in that case, International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, was established during this time, during 1950s, and then that was due to this Marshall Plan. So when IBRD was developed, this could revive many countries which were in economic distress. When such things were happening in and around the world after the Second World War II, people started thinking little higher. How can the country survive? What are the major aspects for the country to survive? So that is how we had in 1960s Walt Whitman Rostov. He proposed the 5 stages of economic growth model. So the country needs to survive. You need the country to develop economically also. So the 5 stages of economic growth model with which Rostov began with was 1, the traditional society. So he had a vision that a country can survive with its agricultural ability. So when agriculture can be improved, in that case, the people, the labor will also get employed. So agricultural system had to be improved. So that was what he said he meant by the traditional society. Second thing, preconditions for takeoff. Preconditions for takeoff is the next stage to the traditional society. They started with mechanized agriculture, how the systems, that is the importance of agriculture, can be reached out to the people. So Rostov, to develop the economic growth model, he brought the traditional society, the first stage in traditional society, where he said the countries should focus on agriculture. Agriculture is the primary system which can bring the progress of a country. That was what Rostov said. And through agriculture, many were given employment. Many can be given employment also. So labor can be involved. And a little bit of trade also begins. A little bit of trade amidst themselves begins. So that was a traditional society he means. The next stage begins with preconditions for takeoff. Preconditions for takeoff, he said agriculture can be introduced in a country. So how can you reach it out to the people? That was the government's role. The government has to bring it to the people. So subsidies can be provided. So agriculture, the people were actually initiated in the field of agriculture. So the equipment were provided to the people to develop the agricultural system in every country, because that was the only way where they can come out of this distress. So employment has to be given. Poverty should be minimized. The poverty was very high, so it has to be brought down for the country to upgrade. So that was a takeoff measure which Rostov says. The third stage is takeoff. So it is like a flight which moves. You are stagnant in one place, you are given the engine starts, and then you have your takeoff. So the third stage is very similar to that takeoff stage. So when people are introduced to the agricultural practices, when equipment is provided to them, and manpower is also prevalent, so why not? So system starts to function, and the trade also starts to begin. As the trade starts to begin, the income is also generated. Slowly, the per capita income of the people also starts to increase. So that is a reason they say that is a takeoff measure. Fourth one, he says, is drive to maturity. Maturity stage is where you fulfill the needs of the people. Now, we have the administrative thinker Abraham Maslow. He speaks about the physiological needs of the people. The basic needs which a person requires are the food, shelter, clothing. So once that is attained, we are human. Humans are social beings. So what happens is we move ahead with the next stage where you want to have more and more. So once you reach the higher range, that is called as your self-actualization. So here when maturity, drive to maturity is, when there is a self-actualization, there prevails the maturity. So when the income starts generated, it starts being generated in the country, the development happens. Slowly the infrastructure is provided to the people, and so the progress begins. So that is the drive to maturity. And the last is age of mass consumption. I can say that this age of mass consumption is prevalent today because the choices, the demands, the preferences of people are changing day by day. Today the needs are very high. What happened, that is during the pandemic, during COVID-19, when people felt the education system is going to fade away or is going to get effaced, there came this digital revolution. The students were able to learn through online means. Children learn the concepts, the theories. Of course, they missed the practical aspects, but the theoretical part were being taught to the students through the online mode. We did not know about various platforms that are available in technology. Today you have what is called as a Google Meet, you have the WebEx, you have the Zoom. So the offices also started to run through run with the meetings, conferences through these platforms. So people did not stop working. They started to generate more and more income and manpower, of course, but manpower was reduced during this time because the companies also feared how the progression would happen. So they actually limited the manpower, but today we have succeeded in coming out of that pandemic and resumed to a little bit of normalcy too. So age of mass consumption is whatever happens, we do not rely just on one aspect. Agriculture is there, we have technology. Through the technology, the industries are also developing. So then the consumption is also higher. So that is the age of mass consumption. Now these 5 aspects were what Rostov stated. But what ultimately happened? He gave these stages, but then his model lacked the inclusive development. He did not think about the vulnerable sections in the society. He just thought about the normal beings and he never thought about the vulnerable sections. He did not focus on the affordability of these schemes or these attributes to these sections of the society, and so his model actually failed. So with all these aspects, what do we understand by development administration? George Gantt, he is considered as a father of development administration. He says it is a relative concept. Can we ever say a country can be fully developed? No. You can never consider a country as fully developed because we cannot assume how we have full employment. Full employment is also not possible. In the same way, fully developed state is also not possible in a country. So he says development not being an absolute but a relative condition, with no country ever qualifying as fully developed. A country can rely, it's a complexity of various agencies, the management systems. Today we have moved ahead from the traditional system of administration to the modern system. We will deal with the traditional system of administration in the next few slides. Now here it's a complex of agencies. Now we have what is called as, today we have what is called as the new public administration and the new public management. New public management and new public administration actually aids in good governance. So good management system as such means where we have the good cooperation, the coordination, communication. So all the organizational principles can be applied here with the technology. An efficient system which can work very effectively and economically. That is what is a present role today. So we have the term, so he says the term development administration denotes the complex of agencies, management systems and processes a government establishes to achieve its development goals. So the government has its goals. So it has to achieve these goals very economically, efficiently as well as very effectively. So it relies on the administration of policies, programs, projects to serve development and purposes. No country can thrive without policies. Policies are very important for the progress of the country's economy. It is necessary to provide welfare to the people. So policies are very important for a country. So development administration is considered as a relative concept which integrates all the complex agencies with good efficient management systems and organization systems, and good planning with good policies and programs. So that is what George Gant speaks about development. RIGS, another definition of RIGS is on increasing autonomy of social systems made possible by rising level of diffraction. Diffraction is where you find a light passing through the prism and then it diffracts. The same way the policy of the government passes through the prism. RIGS theory speaks about the prismatic model. So Rigsian theory says that the policies of the government, when it passes through proper agency like the legislature, it has to get the approval from the legislature to reach to the people. So when it passes through that kind of a prismatic situation, it diffracts, which means that it goes to all the sections of the people in the country. So Rigsian theory in development administration is one of the important concepts which we would be studying in the forthcoming sessions. Development earlier, or I can say we used to consider development, as I said, was the basic principle of Maslow, just the basic needs which has to be fulfilled. But today, development is expansion of real freedom. Earlier was a situation we had required good housing, shelter, good food, so that was necessary for development. But today it is beyond that, where people require good healthcare systems, good educational systems, where you need good schools, good colleges, good universities, where they upgrade themselves and bring in income for our country for its progress. And so development, through development, people can also have opportunities to expand their freedom. So that is the present concept of development according to Amartya Sen, a very famous economist. So he says that development can be seen as an expansion of the real freedom. That is what I said, when people's choices, preferences and demands are changing day by day, the freedom is also increasing. Why do we require that? That is our right to liberty, that is our right to life. It's a liberty. So Article 21 is prevalent here. The government has to take care of the people here. So it is beyond, it's an expansion of freedom. So today you have a different modernized kind of a development that is happening in the future, which is happening right today also. When development is as such, what is more required in development? Development is actually a dynamic process. It is a goal-oriented process. But for all these, you require a decentralized mechanism. Decentralization is very important, where it diffuses the power and business at the center via delegating its authority. So decentralization is where you have the relationship between the union and the state. So we have the three tiers of the government: union, state and the local government. So when we start with from the grassroots level, we need to focus on the local government as such. So grassroots level of governance is very important. So that is a decentralization. So the Prime Minister can delegate his authority to the chief ministers of various states. The chief ministers can in turn delegate his authority to at the district level or the local level, where you have the municipalities, the panchayats and all the local bodies. So you have that delegation of authority. So that is very mandatory, because that is when the progress happens. It has to begin from the grassroots level. So where the panchayat system has to actually improve in a country for it to develop at a very high rate. So decentralization is a diffusion of power and business at the center via delegation of authority down to agencies in the rural areas also. So, this requires good planning system. These are the methods, that is, I can say for the decentralization, planning system is good, important, information and reporting systems, human resource development and coordination. Human resource, manpower, that is very important for decentralization. We move on to what is called as a scope of development administration. As I told you earlier, 50 years ago, food, shelter and clothing were considered basic for the minimum standard of living, but today various other factors like health, education, internet facilities have become a part of the development administration. Can we survive without internet? Can we survive without the mobile phones? It is not possible today. Today everybody are involved in the technology. Smartphones are on the rise. You can check your email, you can get into the social media, get to know the news for the day. Everything is available at your doorstep. Everything is available in your hand. So, we cannot survive without technological aspect. So, India is also improving. It's progressing at a very high rate in digitalization. We would have seen various progress or the development India has been facing. We saw the demonetization period where we shifted from having cash in our hand to cashless transactions. People started using the various facilities like Paytm, the Google Pay. So, when people did not know, were not aware about all these aspects, we went to cashless transactions where banks, from one bank to another bank, you can transfer the money using your technology. So, we are upgrading. So, that is what is happening today. So, when we think about the scope is where development administration is necessary, where it is very essential or where it has to be applied. So, that is required for reduction of poverty. Development administration's first goal is to reduce poverty and provide a sustainable living for all. So, that is very mandatory because only when there is a reduction in poverty, we can have the increase in numbers of per capita income. But how can we decrease or bring down the poverty level? Where does poverty come from? Poverty comes from unemployment. People have to be given a lot of employment opportunities. Today there are many youngsters who are not employed. Today there is a gap between the education and the employment, the youth, in the youth. A person who is into humanities works as something else when they come out of the system. So, there is a big gap between what the student studies and what he is employed. So, that is where we have this Atmanirbhar today, where people are self-reliant, learn to be self-reliant through startup firms. So, the government today has brought in the skill development programs, the vocational training programs, where any individual can start up a firm where your MSME will actually assist in developing the system or creating employment opportunities. So, slowly when employment is being provided, automatically poverty can also be reduced. So, there was a recent study which also stated that the poverty is actually getting reduced in India. The second scope of development administration is goal of increasing opportunities. So, opportunities, as I told you, when you have employment, you have more opportunities to think. So, your quality of life, dignity, human rights and liberty. You get a self-confidence, you become very self-reliant. So, when the goal of increasing opportunity is prevalent, every human will feel very elated because of the provision of exclusive standards of living. So, that is the second one. Third one is capacity for development. So, capacity of development strives to increase the capacity. We have the development policies, projects and programs that are initiated in the private and public sectors. Earlier I told you that we had a mixed economy system. So, from mixed economy, when in 1991 we shifted to the new industrial policy or the new economic policy, which brought in liberalization, privatization and globalization, which we have the acronym, LPG. So, these three concepts brought in the private and the public sectors together. So, the government had its own rules, the norms and standards, and regulated how the private sectors will have to work. So, private sectors were always focusing, they do focus on the profit, but they do have to abide by the norms and regulations that are being provided by the government. So, the public and private sectors, there are many policies which are being created or initiated for this particular development. So, development administration focuses on that too. People centric. Without citizens' participation, the country cannot develop or the government cannot go for governance standards. Today we have a concept called the engaged governance, where we rope in people to participate, give your outputs. So, that is how we have various projects. You can see many children in the government schools who have brought in models and projects, and they rise higher and higher to in the education field. So, you find opportunities being given to the children here. And people centric, you have the people, it is for the people, the government is working for the people. So, ultimately the government is actually, the elected representatives are actually being voted by the people. So, the responsibility relies there, the accountability relies there. So, whatever development the government takes up, it has to be people centric. They have to get the fulfill the demands of the people, plus they would also have to reach to those demands. So, that is what is people centric. So, development administration, where the people are the ultimate beneficiary to whom all processes and policies are directed. To achieve this, the nation must count on social, economic, political and cultural aspects. So, ultimately the government focuses on fulfilling the fundamental rights of the people. So, that is a people centric. Institution building. So, institutions are required to convert the policies and programs into action. You can't keep the policies or the programs in hand. It has to be an action plan. It has to be provided to the people. It has to reach to the people through various actions. So, that depends on 3, capability. The institution should be capable to carry forward that particular task. The institution, for example, we have a lot of technological institutions, like we can say Infosys. Infosys is one of the biggest institution in the technological field. So, they have, the institution has to get the approval, it has to get the nod that they can survive, they can sustain. You take example for the banks, you have HDFC Bank, you have the Citibank. So, all these banks have to prove to the public or to prove to the people that they are capable of providing them or assisting them with funds. So, that capability should be prevalent. 2, public acceptance. The public should accept that these institutions are trustworthy. Now, you have NABARD. NABARD is one of the institution which helps many self-help groups. There is one self-help group organization in Kerala called the Kudumbashree. In Kudumbashree, you find women are economically progressing, they start earning. who helps them? It is from the panchayat that assists it helps the women to take up this role of being self-reliant. So they seek the help of NABARD in getting the loans. And once they start the business, once they start to be self-reliant, they start repaying the loans. So there are very different kinds of development systems. So the people should actually be convinced that this particular institution can be accepted. And survival capacity is nothing but its sustainability, how far they can sustain. So that is the survival capacity. Now, development administration, we say it has to be a part of a curriculum. Like how we have Indian economy, this development administration has to be a part of the curriculum for the people, let it be in the science or the humanities or the social science, whatever. It has to be a part of the curriculum because it is then the youth will understand the importance of nation building and socio-economic progress. Then transnational development. Transnational, it is not necessary that we have to be focused on our thoughts. We can imbibe from the thoughts of Western countries, and the Western countries can also take in our models. So that is a transnational aspect. So development administration does not limit itself to national level, but goes beyond the boundaries. They are built on Western models with some modifications to suit their need. Nature. So here nature, it's a collective decision. Making must be initiated within a society to bring about political and administrative change. So it is just not an individual's decision, but it has to be a collective decision of political and administration. So that is, a bureaucrat should also be involved in decision making. Variability. Variability is where there is a relationship between a polity and its environment, which varies in a development. That is, a developing country has got more capability of changing. As I told in the previous slide, we need to have the public acceptance, the capacity, the people should accept that particular institution. So that variation should not be there. So that is what they say. Then the stages of development, it has to be political, economical and organizational. So that is dependent on administrative doctrines, and it governs the development of administrative capabilities. So the political institutions, the capabilities of the political institutions also matters. So these are the 2 points which determines the variability in development administration. The third one is the political context of administrative development. As I told you just now, the bureaucracy is a main instrument of the government, as the administrators also perform political functions. So the administrators are the ones who actually provide the skeletal framework of the plans and the policies, and they are the ones who get into the field to collect the material or the data and provide for the making of the policies. So the political context of administrative development is very, very important. And the economic context of economic development, it is like you can say that a financial means to support a highly paid bureaucracy. It has high levels of economic production. So it is like to improve, it can improve the administrative capabilities. We characterize with a lot of concepts like corruption, red tapeism, and a lot of concepts are being brought in administration. So they say that if you improve the administrative capabilities by increasing, you have to reward them properly. So this can reduce the corruption or political pressure, and they can work effectively towards the increased economic growth. Now, what are the features of development administration? As I told you, it is a dynamic process. It is affected by the internal and external environment. Now, internal and external environment, this reminds me of the policy model of David Easton. David Easton brings in what is called as a black box model. So, in this black box model, they speak about the system where you have an input and an output. So, in input you have the demands of the people, and it is being supported by the rules and policies and the laws of the government. What happens is the choices and the preferences of the people are taken in as inputs and stored in this box, which is considered as a black box. Not all can be fulfilled, but whatever can be fulfilled will be taken up by the government, and then it moves on to the output. Now, this particular demand is actually being influenced by the internal and external environment. Internal environment is nothing but the government agencies within the country. So, that is an internal environment. External are the other external forces, the international agencies, the United Nations agencies like World Health Organization, Food and Agricultural Organization. So, all these organizations are the external agencies. So, they influence. So, that makes the development very dynamic. Relative, as the father of development administration, George Gant, says, it is a relative concept. It is not an absolute concept because it keeps changing. Progression has to happen every second, every minute in a country. So, it is a relative concept, and it is a nature of basic services keep changing. External nature, it deals with activities that require interagency collaboration to implement policies and programs. So, this is actually of two types, informal and formal. External nature involves a client participation. Informal and formal is where you can have the non-governmental organizations coming into picture, aiding them, aiding the people. NGOs are very much important for our country for various rehabilitation situations, to manage the problems faced by the people in our country. So, those are informal agencies, and also the citizens. Citizens are also considered as informal because you can express your view. You can express your view through the media, and your opinions can actually be raised. So, it is an informal way. Formal is what the government provides, the legislature provides through various rules and regulations. External nature also involves client participation. Client participation is where again it is mentioned under the citizen-centric concept. Efficiency. Development administration focuses on efficiency. How can we have the efficiency? This is through the technology. Earlier, gone are the days where we had to stand in a queue to pay our electricity bills, the telephone bills. Today, everything you can do it through your smartphones. You can use online facilities to fetch money. You can pay your electricity bills, the utility bills. Everything can be done. The loans can also be paid. That all happens because of this technology. So, efficiency is improving. So, there is a drastic difference from 1990s, that is from the 20th century to the 21st century. We are moving very drastically. So, technology is very important to evaluate the efficiency also. So, finally, we have the difference between traditional and development administration. So, traditional administration, it lacks purposeful development action. It is not responsive to social and economic development, not concerned with inequities, and does not think about equitable distribution. Whereas development administration, the present system, it speaks about persuasive and positive response. It's concerned with removing all kinds of inequities, promotes innovation. This is a very important point to be noted. Promotes innovation and change, quality of administration and justice for all. So to conclude, development administration plays an instrumental role in 3 ways, like helps in programming, planning and policy making. It is responsible for implementing the government plans, and it has to keep the citizens informed. So this is a major role of the government also if the government thinks about socio-economic progress and development of its country. So this is an institutional, the state's capability to provide viable institutional framework for development. So development administration, so far we have discussed about the definition, the meaning of development administration, the nature, the scope of administration, what are the differences between the traditional administration and the present modern administration also. So in the forthcoming sessions, we will speak about, or we will learn more about, the development administrative concepts, the sustainable development, where we will discuss on the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and then the inclusive development. What are the development progresses that we would come across for the country as such. So these will actually help us to focus on the nation building and socio-economic progress. So through this, we will also know how important development administration is in the discipline of public administration, where it connects the government and the people at the right point, at the right place, very effectively, efficiently and quite economically. Thank you.